Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sword of Truth. Today we're discussing where are the dinosaurs in the book of Genesis. Well, let's jump right into it. Simply put, the answer is right at the beginning, in the first two verses of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That's Genesis 1:1. He created it. That's all it says. It's a simple statement of fact. Verse 2 is also a separate paragraph and reads, "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." Now that doesn't exactly sound like a world that God would have created, the great creator. Why would it be void? Why would it be without form? It's covered by darkness. This does not sound like God. Or rather, doesn't sound like God's creation. Sounds almost like destruction. What's also interesting is the Hebrew words used here are tohu and bohu, which I am probably pronouncing incorrectly. But tohu means vain, confusion, wasteland, place of chaos. And bohu means void, empty, waste. This does not sound like something made by the great creator. This sounds like something that's post-apocalyptic. This implies that God created the world before and then destroyed it, which, of course, we've all heard of the great flood of Noah, where God was planning on destroying the entire world, in fact, did, but then made an agreement with Noah to save him and his family, as well as two of each of the animals. Because what we have is a willingness to destroy the creation if he's unhappy with it. This implies that he may have done this multiple times before. And this also lines up with science. We have found evidence that the Earth was created something like 85 million years ago. At least scientifically. We know this because we know about the sedimentary layers and how long it takes for those to form, and the fact that the climate would have had to be different there, or different at those times in order to form the layers the way they did. A whole lot of science that goes into that. And there's a lot of study, because science is not the study of faith, it's the study of facts, the things that we can observe. Theology is the study of much of what we cannot observe, although from observable facts, we can draw theological conclusions. Now, I'm not going to dive too deep into that, but we've seen evidence that the world is old. There are those people that believe the world is only 6,000 years old, and they base that off of biblical evidence, and I'm not going to argue that it does appear that the world, at least from humanity's sake, our story began about 6,000 years ago. But that does not mean that this planet started 6,000 years ago. It's a bit of a stretch to even extend that to that meaning. We start really in verse 2. Verse 1 is a statement of fact, in the beginning. It does not say in the beginning God created man. It says in the beginning God created heaven and earth. That does not mean that 3 seconds later he made us. It means that in verse 2, which is also paragraph 2, he made us. He shaped the world and made our world in 7 days, or 6 days, and rested on the seventh. It does not mean that that was the first thing he ever did. He's an eternal being. I'm sure he made many worlds and remade those worlds and remade our world multiple times, infinitely creating and destroying, trying to get it right, trying to make a creation that he could be proud of, until he finally decided not to totally obliterate us, even though, because of sin, we absolutely deserve it. But that is a separate story for a separate episode. What we have in the rest of Genesis is the story of a reshaping of the world. And really a story of how our world became what it is. The book of Genesis is an origin story. It's our origin story. But that does not mean that there was not something before us. In fact, to say that we were the first thing that God created would be to say that we are as great as he is. It'd be extremely arrogant to say something like that. Oh, we are basically his first creation. I'm not nearly arrogant enough to make that claim. So, what about the dinosaurs? Why did he make them? Well, the answer to that question, unknown. What we do know is that they definitely lived before us. Any archaeologist will tell you that. There might be some argument of, well, is this 5 million years ago? Is this 5 billion years ago? Carbon dating can be off by a few thousand years, but, especially when you get back that far. But it's not something that you're going to look at as, oh, this is 1 billion years old, and really it's only a couple hundred. It doesn't have that kind of error. There's some leeway as to exactly how far back something is, but it is a scientific method. There's plenty of evidence as to how that works, and you can do all that research if you're really interested in exactly how carbon dating works. But it is relatively accurate, and there's no reason to think that it wouldn't be. Again, some question in there as far as exactly the number of years, but nothing that would have them say, oh, this is billions of years old, and something that's only a couple thousand. So it appears that the dinosaurs lived prior to the creation of man, but also prior to Genesis 2. This would be some sort of previous version, and science even tells us that there was a cataclysmic event, an apocalyptic event that destroyed the entire world and destroyed the dinosaurs. We usually learn about that or picture it as a meteor coming down and crashing into the earth. That's from science. And then the dawn of man comes after that. That's what we learn from science. And that does line up with the book of Genesis. Not because Genesis describes those events, but because Genesis allows for it. There is a gap. There's an entire paragraph change between the statement that God did a thing, which was creating the world, and then him deciding to shape it into our world. There is a lot that could have happened between those two paragraphs. It's not just the end of one sentence and the beginning of the next. It is the end of it paragraph. That first sentence is a fact statement. That is all. After that, we start to describe our beginning. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Sword of Truth. If so, hit that like button and drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you thought of the episode. Let me know if you have any questions, if you have ideas for future episodes, and subscribe if you haven't already.